you think about why blockchain, believe me, there's probably 100 reasons or things to make this that aren't blockchain, but none of them solve the core issue, which is trust. Like the industry needs to trust one another and every other kind of variation of tracking. In a blockchain protocol like ours, you don't need to trust that the streaming service is relaying the information correctly, because you can see that information and you're certifying it at the same time. And there's only a consensus reached once all three parties have agreed that this in fact counts. So you don't need to trust the other person for the numbers to be correct. So it allows everyone to participate trustlessly, which is the key to blockchain. And then I think the other reason you use blockchain is typically some sort of accounting function, which is exactly what we're using for. So I think that we're probably, you know, as we've discussed before, I've been in the blockchain space for a while. I did not want to, I'm the first one to not want to use blockchain for every solution, because I think that everyone thinks it's the silver bullet occasionally, and it's just it's a mess. And I was like, no blockchain on this. And then it is probably the one use case that I can think of where it actually makes sense. And I'm just like, okay, well, I guess we're moving forward with blockchain then.
So when you started on this, you really weren't thinking of a blockchain solution necessarily.
I didn't want it to be. So when we started doing custom, when we heard about this problem, so we had a really large label come to us, one of the largest independent labels in the world. This whole problem came to us. I didn't even know this existed. So we were at a football game with my co-founder, Morgan, and you know, we were discussing royalties and how they're paid out with some music people that we've known for 15 years. And this sort of problem came out that like, hey, we don't actually have a count for the number of times a song is played. And what's interesting is, in a lot of ways, labels are the new artists, because like when you think about 20 years ago, artists didn't control distribution. They didn't know how many times something was being sold. They didn't like, they had to trust the label was doing their job correctly. In a lot of ways, the labels they need to know too. So they get marketing level data back. They know like some information, but that data is not royalty certified. And so there's a huge discrepancy in marketing level data and what counts. Good example is if somebody plays your song 100 times in a day, you know, the first 10 count for royalties, the next 90 don't, right? And so understanding that this play count might not actually represent what counts for being paid is different. And so there's a lot of these issues there. So when they brought it up, they're like, do you think you could build this? We went and checked with a bunch of players, and we, you know, spent a lot of time trying to understand why iterations of something like this had failed. We talked to some major labels who tried to build some stuff. We talked to other companies that had attempted and failed and why they failed. And almost always it came down to timing and trust and neutrality. The fact that it needed to be third-party neutral. Anytime it had been started by a major player, the other major parties were unwilling to use it. And so it needed to be this kind of Switzerland in the music industry. And honestly, that's why we were like, okay, well, we now know it needs to be blockchain, because they're all demanding that it be some kind of tool that they don't have to trust the other party for. And honestly, there's guys like Benji Rogers and people that had really been educating the music industry for 3 or 4 years on blockchain. And I think what ended up happening is a lot of them started really buying into the notion that blockchain could solve the trust problem. They were trying to have a kind of grasp, I think a lot of them, is where are the trust problems in supply chain? And there's a bunch of clear areas, but I think usage wasn't one that was being addressed. Like everyone was focused on chain of title, who owns what track, and not very many people were looking at, well, what happens after that track's made. And so that's how we started. We had this large label that said, we'll be your first customer if you can build this. Can you please build this? And we were like, no, not blockchain. Like, please no. And you know, and it wasn't because I was scared of it. Like I'd been in this space for 7-8 years. In terms of like investing and building stuff casually for fun. I knew how hard it would be. And if we didn't need it, I didn't want to just apply blockchain to a problem that wasn't really a problem. So was it going to be a solution for a problem no one had, was my issue. And is it the best solution for this? And that's what we really spent a good 4 to 6 months validating, was why blockchain? Does it need to be blockchain? How do we build this without blockchain? And then eventually settle on the fact it does need to be blockchain. And even worse, my worst nightmare, like it needs to be a blockchain that can process millions of transactions per second, because that's how fast streaming's going. And blockchain does not move fast. So how are we going to build a fast-paced blockchain to keep up with throughput for usage?
If you like this video, why not check out the full interview this is an excerpt from? You should see a link to that full interview somewhere here on the screen, and I'll also put one in the description box below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it, and do subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date with all my videos as they go live. So thank you so much for watching, and stay curious.